homer, led the league in tackles with 85. The deep ball for Darius Prince, and Philadelphia's on the board first.
On the draw, this is Bryson Allen. And Allen weaving his way all the way down to the 22.
10-yard line, 5. Mayfield, dancing all around. Throwing as far as he can throw it. Jump ball coming. Crazy stuff. Not this time.
And you want to be a wide receiver. You're going to have to take a little bit of a hit like that as Brown got him in that shoulder, but watch. Those are teeth.
Do we have a dentist on staff here?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with season 3 of Around the Indoor Football World. Today we've got some really awesome guests coming up. Super excited for this week's episode. We're going to talk some good stuff. We're going to talk some bad stuff. We're going to talk a little bit of everything. That's kind of the point of the show. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of welcome on my co-hosts, and then we'll get on to the guests and the guest hosts as well. TJ, how you doing this morning?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to another episode. Krish, man, how are you doing out there in India today?
I'm doing well, excited to talk some business.
Absolutely. And then the special guest host of today's episode, one I've been working on to get on here for a while, Trey from Off the Wall. Trey, how you doing this morning?
I am doing well. I really appreciate the invite. Yeah, like you said, there's been a long time coming, and I'm humbled to get the invite. So I'm excited to talk ball with y'all.
Sure. We're humbled to have you all. Respect for what you do on your page and your interviews and basically everything you got going on. I think if you are not following Off the Wall, you should definitely be following them on Twitter. A lot of funny content comes out all the time. The memes and the GIFs lately have been hilarious, which we'll get to in a little bit here about the NAL specifically. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and welcome on our guest, Mr. Jaylen Bass. Did I pronounce your last name there correctly?
Yes. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
All right.
I appreciate y'all for having me.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure, man. So, Krish, why don't you go ahead and kick us off as far as introducing your guest here today, and then we'll go ahead and get into the topics for the IFL this morning.
Yeah, Jaylen is a great defensive lineman. He signed with the Gridiron Crew, one of the premier agencies in the industry. He signed with the Arizona Rattlers. He's from Buffalo University. Really, really great D lineman all the way around. I think he has a chance to win Defensive Rookie of the Year for the IFL, so really excited to talk to him today for sure.
High praise for sure. Do you want to go ahead and open up the questions as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Jaylen, my first question for you kind of right off the bat is, you attended Buffalo University. Your former teammate, wide receiver for the Iowa Barnstormers, Quan Williams, also attended Buffalo University. How much did he influence your decision to come over here to the IFL?
He tried to influence me last year, but it was too into the process to get into the IFL. But he was a great influence. You know what I'm saying? Q's a good guy. He's a great person. And he just tried to get me the best advice.
Completely understandable. Jaylen, I'm kind of curious, man. Obviously a lot of players will look down on indoor football and the opportunities they can provide. What was the ultimate selling factor for you to jump into the IFL and kind of see where this can take you?
Just honestly, just another chance to play football. You know what I'm saying? It's just really football for real. Because I've been playing this since I was a kid. I just love football. So just another chance to get to play football again. So, yeah.
Love it. Trey, do you have any questions?
Yeah. So, Jaylen, pleasure to meet you, man. Something I've learned over time interviewing players on my show is that the common theme is they want to get to the outdoor game, but using the indoor game to collect some tape. It's like you'd rather get some tape than be sitting at home being like, man, I wish I was playing right now.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about your experience with the Gridiron crew. I had Oscar on Off the Wall in the fall, and I've been chatting with Nick for a while from that team. What's it been like having them in your corner? It seems like having a really solid agency is a great, it's just a great resource to have, especially breaking into the indoor world.
Oh yeah, they've been a great influence since day one. Since I signed with them, we've been getting everything squared away. They told me, I swear, I think it was like for like 15 minutes. He's like, 15 minutes, I'll get you on the team. And then it was just like, at that, Arizona Rattlers reached out. I was already sold by then because they just won a championship. So I'm trying to be definitely one of them ones.
TJ, do you have anything for him?
What do you think has been the biggest difference in transitioning from college to pro football so far for you, anyway?
just being on your own schedule. Just being on your own schedule and just know how to do your time management, because you ain't going to class no more. You're not doing all that kind of stuff no more. So just training and just keeping yourself busy, honestly.
Awesome. Krish, you got anything else for him?
Yeah, Jaylen, obviously you start camp here soon, right? When you go into camp as a rookie, what is one thing you're doing technique-wise to kind of separate yourself from the rest of the pack?
Just playing with low pads, keep my pads low. Just doing everything right. Just coming in, learning from the older guys, obviously. Just being a sponge, honestly. Just learning from the older guys and just being who I am. You know what I'm saying? So I think that would separate me.
Definitely. So what did it mean to you to be able to join a ready main team like Arizona that just won the championship for you?
It's very exciting because, like, I've been winning championships my whole life, I've been winning championships my whole life, so it just feels good to be on a winning team or winning culture. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't get that everywhere. You know what I'm saying?
It's definitely fair. Trey or TJ, you got anything else?
I was going to say there are worse spots you could be in than with the Arizona Rattlers. They've been around for 30 plus years, and there's a reason for it. Have you made your way out to Arizona yet? Or are you going to be there? Soon?
I'm going to be there in a couple days, next week, Wednesday.
Very cool. Outside of football, what are you excited about in Arizona?
Just learning the new plays, man. Just seeing new people. Just
being
in touch with new people and just connecting with people, honestly.
Yeah, it's a little bit different from Buffalo, but I think you'll like it a little bit better. So.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Well,
you didn't like the weather up in Buffalo?
Oh no, I did not. I'm from the South, so like it don't really get cold down here like that. But it really get cold in Buffalo. I really like the being hot, honestly, for real.
That is fair.
Mm-hmm.
TJ, you got anything?
What obviously as a team, you're joining the defending champs, you want to go win another championship, but in terms of personal goals, do you have any kind of stat or anything like that mentally you're going for as a goal?
Just honestly, just being my what can I say? Probably just being a dog. Well, I ain't gonna just say that. Just being a person. How can I say this?
I like that. Just be a dog every play.
Yeah,
I think that works.
I'm just gonna put it out there. Just be a dog every play. Just be having somebody that, like just like having. How can I say it?
Look, man, if you're a dog every play, good things are gonna happen.
Yeah, that's good. It just definitely happen.
That was a perfect response.
Yeah.
Definitely could see that. I mean, honestly, what more could you want from a player coming in, especially an indoor football rookie like yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Krish, do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, Jaylen, appreciate your time. Obviously, this morning, I know Coach Sire Burley and Coach Guy, they're going to get you right for 2025. So best of luck.
I appreciate y'all for having me. More blessings to y'all. Appreciate y'all for real.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
We really
Best of
appreciate your
luck
time
this
this morning,
season.
man.
Oh yeah. So
Anybody else got anything?
All good.
All right, Jaylen, thank you so much for your time this morning. We'll
Okay.
go ahead and let you get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your day, man.
Yes,
And
sir.
once again, thank you for coming on.
I appreciate y'all.
Absolutely. Best of luck this season.
Yes, sir.
All right. Once again, that was Jaylen Bass with the Arizona Rattlers, a defensive lineman. As Krish said, definitely a candidate for defensive rookie of the year. Sorry, before I say player of the year. Definitely looking forward to seeing what he can put together this season. But there's definitely some other topics we're going to get to in the IFL, not least of which is the potential expansion that's kind of been rumored to be kicking around here. It's heading into 2026, as we all know. The IFL really likes to bring teams on early in the process and kind of let them, for lack of a better term, float out there while they kind of get their stuff together and make sure they have some time to kind of monitor the situation as the season goes, and ultimately have, a good amount of time to see what's going on with them, as well as, the sponsorship sales side, which we all know is super crucial to this. So, Krish, I know you've been kind of keeping tabs on some of the teams that could come in. Can you kind of give us a rundown on what you've heard so far?
Yeah, I've had really positive conversations with my sources, based on the teams that could come in. I can confidently say the IFL will be over 20 teams in 2026. I think over 24. I really think, Commissioner Tyron, he's really, going hard with it. I've heard Atlanta, I've heard South Carolina, I've heard obviously Buffalo seems legit. So there's so many possible options. Wisconsin is another team in Wisconsin is what I've heard. So I've heard it from multiple people. There's going to be a whole division coming in. So I just think the IFL is obviously the caliber, right? The highest caliber of indoor football. And I really think they're just going to keep going. They're going to keep growing it. And a national TV deal, that's coming soon. That's not too far away. They already have one with CBS Sports. But I really, from what I heard, like, they're really, really, they want to partner with streaming partners that we know, that people know. Not your thing you type in Safari. Like, legit, streaming partners. So I'm just excited and ready to go for the IFL.
You're muted, Shay.
My bad. Sorry about that, guys. Trey, do you have any thoughts on the markets that he just mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, and I'm curious if IFL is going to follow the same playbook that they have with the most recent expansions. And what I mean by that is, you take a look at like Tulsa, Vegas, Fishers. They all partner with like hockey teams that are already established in their communities, so that they have the built-in logistics. And like Chad Roland saying, he's mentioned a bunch of ECHL teams. That makes the most sense, because what kills these teams is the back-end logistics, where they don't have the infrastructure to support these things. Well, you don't have to build the infrastructure if you're using the infrastructure you already have. It's like building an add-on to your house. You're not building a new house from the ground up. You're just adding a living room. You're just adding an extra bedroom. So I think that makes the most sense. And with the ECHL specifically, when you look at the roster of ECHL teams they have, you got teams in Greenville, South Carolina, like Krish mentioned. You got teams like all across the country that geographically could be a really good fit for the IFL. We know they're West heavy right now, but the more you work your way east, you fill in the gaps between Massachusetts and Jacksonville, which is just entirely too big right now. So I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'm interested. I think 24 is aggressive, like Chris said, but I'd be interested to see which ones do come on and would be good partners for the league.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to kind of see if they are able to make that jump. I mean, what we're talking, another 10 teams in one season. That's insanity. But I mean, if anybody can pull it off at this point, it's probably the IFL. They've been the picture of stability in the indoor football league industry for a long time now. TJ, any thoughts on some of those markets they just listed?
I would agree with the with getting in an arena and getting an owner that already has an established team like in the ECHL. I can tell you firsthand, coaching for a team that shared an arena with an AHL team that we were not at all affiliated with, it was horrible. We were constantly the second fiddle. If they had a schedule change, we had to have a schedule change because they came first. So I think that really is the way to go. Get an established owner because, again, I think we've also talked about it. I think even last season, you know, you can get a deal then because, well, I already have a hockey team here, so don't nickel and dime me on my arena team. In some cases, you see a lot of guys that own minor league hockey teams tend to either have stake or ownership in the arena as well. So, I mean, it's like a win-win for a lot of those owners. Then they wouldn't have as much financial stress, everything else. And with some of the stuff going on these last couple weeks, especially, I would just wherever they go, I just want to see stability and for it to financially make sense from the jump, not have to figure it out along the way. Because that's where the instability with basically arena and indoor football as a sport is right now, unfortunately.
Completely agree. And honestly, one of the things that I wanted to speak on is we talked to Fishers earlier this offseason, and it seems like they have a really, really good setup so far. Trey kind of talked about the logistics sides of things, having that infrastructure in place, how important that really is for some of these teams to survive. And then on top of things, when you really kind of boil it down, we all know that at the end of the day, when you're buying in bulk, things typically come cheaper, right? So, I mean, when you think about things like housing and, arena rent and stuff like that, typically these big organizations that have the hockey team on one end and then the football team on another, I mean, they're going to be great partners for arenas because at that point they're renting, 10, 12, 15, 16, 18 dates a year. And that's huge for a smaller arena in that 7 to 10,000 range. I mean, it's honestly a huge boon for not only the team, but also the arena, all their partners, and then sponsorship sales when you're looking at that as well. I mean, you can carry over some of the sponsors from the hockey team over to the football team and vice versa, which I think also helps because, those sponsors are then getting a lot more exposure for their dollar, which goes a long way as well. Housing, if you're buying or renting, 35 rooms, 45 rooms rather than 15, 20 rooms, things go a lot further in that as well. But moving on to the next subject, there's been some coaching changes around the league, and a few of them we have not covered yet. I know this is not on our itinerary, so I apologize for dropping this on you guys. But Krish, why don't you kind of run us through the Massachusetts staff and give us your thoughts on your team, the Pirates?
Man, our staff is loaded. So obviously we got Coach Amir back from the CFL, right? That's huge. He's a winning head coach. He's not like an NAL team that hired a 5-19 head coach, but we won't talk about that. So he's a winning coach, right? And so winning is important. Winning percentage matters. Coach Amir, he has 70% winning percentage. He's under the age of 40. So this guy is super young. He's super energetic. He can run with the players. He's not out of shape like most of these coaches are. So I'm just really, really excited that we bring him in. The defensive coordinator, we got Fred, he goes by Freddie, but Griggs, right? Griggs, man, I'm so excited. He's back with the same DB unit. We got all three of our starting DBs back. So they're familiar with the scheme. That's huge. We got Anthony Payton back at offensive coordinator. Our offense was top 5 in the league under him for 3 years. So he's a great offensive coordinator. And then we got Jordan Mosley as our offensive line coach. Veteran in the game. He's played with Sorry McCullum. He just retired a year ago, so he understands everything. And then we got a local coach, Billy Savory, back as our running back coach. So our staff is smaller this year, but it's efficient. And I love a small, efficient coaching staff. I don't like when teams have 8 different coaches or one coach like they do up in Colorado, right? I like when it's small. So I'm so excited. I really think, I'm going to go into it later, but get ready.
No, I honestly think that's a very interesting staff. I mean, obviously getting Amir Ismail back from the CFL. you have those direct ties to a team in the CFL right now, which can be huge, getting players back outdoors, which we've talked about at nauseum, is the most important factor of what these players are doing this for. So, I mean, if they see that, chances are your chances of recruiting high-level talent is going to be, exponentially better. So, Trey, what are your thoughts on the Massachusetts staff? Just kind of broad, overreaching thoughts.
I get fired up. I get fired up hearing Krish talk about the Massachusetts Pirates. So, I think it's a solid staff. I think Griggs did a great job with that DB group down the line. I was losing faith in Massachusetts midpoint of the season, and it seems like Griggs came in and suddenly that secondary was just aggressive and smacking guys around, and they were the reason that they got to the ship last year. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what Griggs can do. Some of the turnover on offense, specifically at quarterback, running back, is going to be interesting to monitor. So I'm sure Krish will touch on that a little bit later. But I think the coaching staff is what you want at this point, and it's up to how they can translate that to the field.
Absolutely. TJ, any thoughts on that staff?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to improve on a season where you literally got as close as you could without holding the trophy, getting to the championship game, but they've done it. They've changed a lot of things, which isn't necessarily anything new to Massachusetts, but they definitely doubled down this season. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that. They have had a lot of turnover at the coaching staff side of things. And I mean, on the roster as well, I think the last couple of seasons, they've had multiple different starting quarterbacks, multiple different head coaches and coordinators. But ultimately, I think this is a huge staff addition. I mean, Ismail is one of the best in the league right now. I think bringing him in is a huge addition to the team. And honestly, I'm excited to see what he can do. Obviously had a lot of success the first time around in the IFL. So definitely excited to see what they can do with the staff. But another big hire recently that came out, I'm not even sure if you guys caught this, but Reggie Gray, a indoor football veteran, a guy who's kind of a legend in the game himself as a player. He was hired by the Bay Area Panthers as their wide receiver coach, which, man, talk about an amazing staff for Bay Area out there. So let's go to Trey first on this one. What are your thoughts about Reggie Gray, former offensive coordinator, head coach in the CIF, if I remember correctly?
Oh, you mean big play Reggie Gray? Man, that guy was so good as a player. Last week I just rewatched the San Jose versus Jacksonville Arena Bowl, and he made some big plays in that. And he was so good as a player. And him staying in the Bay Area is going to be nice. I'm sure some of the old Bay Area or San Jose SaberCats fans are going to be welcoming him with open arms. But like you mentioned, Bay Area just has an unbelievable coaching staff. I think the best in all of indoor and arena football when you look at the experience, the rings, all that stuff put together. So, Bay Area is going to be a problem yet again. They're not going anywhere, and it's just amazing. They just seem to continue to reload, not just on the field with their roster, but with the coaching staff as well.
Completely agree. Krish, what are your thoughts on big play Reggie Gray?
Yeah, no, Rob Keefe, in my opinion, is the greatest indoor football coach, arena coach of all time. I mean, Rob Keefe, just the way he's so process-oriented. I know we have Darren Arbet, but, I think now Rob Keefe is just he hasn't even hit his prime yet. I mean, he's so good. He's such a good coach. They got Les Moss. They got Rod Windsor, offense coordinator from Nads. You had Reggie Gray. I mean, that's a power forward right there. That's a four-headed monster. And so, great coaches that have great systems attract other great coaches. And that's what Rob Keefe did right here. So big. I'm really happy for Reggie. He was a coach up here in Mass for a little bit. Really great guy, great with the players. Really happy for him. So.
Definitely. I have some firsthand experience with Reggie Gray, having him on the channel, back in the day when he was with the Gillette Mustangs. And honestly, he's a great coach, great person. So very excited about the impact that he can have with Bay Area, which he's joining a team that's been one of the best in the league for the past couple of seasons. So honestly, it's hard to say that staff can really get better, but they definitely didn't get worse with the addition of Gray. TJ, what are your thoughts overall? And then we'll kind of move on to the next subject.
It's kind of like Trey already said, anytime you have the nickname Big Play, he's, I'm not 100% sure. Is he in the AFL Hall of Fame or? or is he just considered basically a Hall of Famer?
That's a good question. I could definitely look that up, but I believe he is. Don't quote me on that.
I'm not sure because of the way the first and second iterations ended. I wasn't sure if he got in before that happened or not. But either way, he's a Hall of Fame caliber player. Multiple time champion. And it's like Krish said, Rob Keefe, those two guys, they're stacked. They're stacked. They've been a contender. They've been a championship champion in recent years. They're going to be a tough out this year. That's for sure. They just keep much like Massachusetts did. They stacked their coaching staff as well now.
Agreed. And honestly, kind of surprised, or at least a little bit of a surprise, that he's not in the AF1 right now with Darren Arbet, but that's a subject for another day for sure. Moving on to the last IFL subject we've got, there's been a lot of rule changes this offseason, dramatic ones that have honestly had a large impact on how we will experience the IFL in 2025. So, I mean, Trey, this was a subject that you wanted to touch on, and a great one at that. Let's let you kind of kick off the topic on this one.
Yeah, I think when this first dropped, it took some people some time to kind of fully understand like how these rules would affect the game. And I think every rule that they passed is going to positively impact the sport of indoor football. And specifically, a couple stand out to me. The positive yardage rule in the final minute. I love that they're going back on this because there were a number of games last year that could have been potential instant classics that I'd be rewatching every week in the offseason. But they just fizzled out because they just ended with 3 kneel downs and that's a wrap. It's done. So when you go back and look at some of the classic arena football games of all time, it usually is Team A could have won if they could have just gained a yard, but Team B just locked down on defense and stopped them and were able to get the ball back. So I think it adds an extra layer to the game. And one thing that I would like to know, I mean, you guys would probably know a little bit better than I do at this point, is I believe this rule was in effect before, but they took it out due to, I believe they referred to it as player safety for like undoing that rule. So I'm curious if that was the reason then, what changed to like, is it fine now? Like, is player safety not a concern with that specific instance anymore? Like, I'm curious what the ideology was and like what the change of heart was triggered by.
That's a great question. I honestly don't know why they ended up removing it. Krish, do you have any idea what the motivation was there?
I'm not, and like Trey said, I would be interested to know why they made that change.
TJ, any thoughts about that rule change in particular, or any of the others that are on the screen at the moment?
First off, I love the positive yardage rule. I guess I'm an old school or an arena purist. I just love that rule. I hated it when the AFL eliminated that rule a handful of years ago. But the rules changes that really have me intrigued are essentially all the defensive rules that has less slighted the defense against the offense, like the linebacker blitzing rule, the twist rule being eliminated, linebackers being able to contact the receiver if they're in the box now. It's just going to add another dimension, and it doesn't slight the defense anymore. It's almost like a true 50-50 now. So we're going to see a lot of new interesting matchups, a lot of new schemes on both offense and defense to accommodate for those rule changes.
Completely agree. And I'm curious, I mean, I've heard a lot of talk about the fact that a lot of these rules are defensive friendly. With that in mind, do you guys think we see an effect on the overall scores of this game? Or, I mean, IFL is kind of traditionally known as a very high scoring game. And honestly, it's one of those things where could this have a dramatic effect on the excitement factor? Or do you guys think that it's going to be a situation where we just see a lot more defensive plays and maybe we're seeing a lot more defensive scoring? Let's go to Trey first on this one.
I think it will initially, but if you go back to last season in the IFL, the total points under hit in the first 13 games of the season. And then what happened? Coaches adapted. They, adjusted their game plan accordingly, and they were able to, light up the scoreboard later on in the year. I think we'll see much of the same here. I think early on, you'll see some lower scoring games, but these coaching staffs have been around the game for a long time. And I think the good coaching staffs are going to be able to adjust. I think this could impact the more veteran quarterbacks the most, if I'm being honest, where they're used to being able to hold on to the ball and being able to run around and try to make something out of nothing. They're not going to have that luxury because the defensive line is going to have free reign to get after you however they can. So I know the ball usually leaves the quarterback's hands very quickly in the indoor game. I think you'll probably see it go a little bit quicker. More one read option plays where it's like, all right, less thinking, more throwing. Let's get it out. But I like the rule as well for the defensive line. I think it frees them up a lot. And I think most importantly, it gets rid of the ticky-tacky challenges that we see that really slowed the game down last year. Too many times there'd be a 40-yard bomb to a wide receiver, and the defensive coach would throw the red flag, hoping that there was a twist or a stunt. And sometimes you would see a maybe twist, I don't know, it could be, get called, and then that 40-yard touchdown is retracted. So I think being able to eliminate those ticky-tacky reviews as well is going to help speed up the game. It's just going to help everybody. And I think rookie players like Jaylen Bass, who we had on earlier, I think they're going to be able to come in and make an immediate impact because they're not being restricted by rules that really put them in a cage. So I think you're going to see rookie defensive linemen really come in and excel. And I think that's exciting to see fresh players come in and really do good from the beginning of their careers.
I definitely agree. And honestly, I think it's going to be a huge deal. Maybe we do see some low scoring games. I honestly am not super concerned with that because at the end of the day, if you're having exciting defensive plays, it's not going to change the flow of the game too much other than the fact that you're just going to see more defensive plays, which in my personal opinion, it seems like every league wants to promote scoring. Obviously, that seems to be the flow of the game that everybody wants to see. But at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with a defensive battle. I mean, where you go back and forth, there's turnovers, there's big plays, sacks, all these different things that can happen. I personally like the defensive kind of battle games, the chess matches, the coaching scheme, and the adjustments along the way. Personally, I think that's kind of exciting to watch in its own right. So I'm excited to kind of see how this all unfolds. TJ, you're a former coach yourself, so I'm kind of curious. I mean, overall, do you think that this is a situation where we see some lower scoring games? And is that something that you as a fan does not want to see, or are you perfectly okay with that as long as the game continues to be exciting?
First off, it would be pretty cool to see an indoor arena game end in a lower scoring game. Every now and then, not all the time, but every now and then, sometimes it's nice to have some extra defense, show up. But I think early on you're going to see the scores dip a little bit, but as the season goes on, more adjustments are going to be made. Coaches, they're going to be able to look at the game film, not just from their game, but also other games, and be able to see it clear in action. Right now it's on paper layer, it's on our computer screen, and they're thinking and adjusting to what it could be out there on the field of what they might see or whatnot. But at the end of the day, when the more as the season goes on, I see the scores they're probably just going to level out. But once you can see it on tape. But for me, the biggest thing is probably, what are the quarterbacks going to do? Like Trey said, with quicker passing. I remember back in the day, the Philly Soul were known for it, snap, and Harbaugh or Rodabaugh would instantly just throw it out. You might see a lot of basically no-look pass plays, which could early on lead to a lot of, pick sixes or easily batted balls. Maybe if it's behind the line of scrimmage, ruled a fumble and recovery by the defense. So you might see more turnovers and stuff early on. But again, I think the scores will even out as the season goes on.
That makes sense. Krish, what are your thoughts on this one before we move on to the NAL?
I want to play off of something Trey said, and I want to add, but I think the indoor defensive veteran becomes so much less valuable. When I say that, with the vet rule and everything, your quarterback, most teams want their quarterback to be a vet. They want to use it on the line. But DBs, man, I want a young, quick DB. that can make plays, and now they can adjust linebackers. We sign and match so many outdoor linebackers, and I can't tell you, we run through, linebackers like underwear. Like, it's so hard to find a good linebacker that can understand the rules and play with the 5 yards. Now the 5 yards are over. I texted my boy, DJ Myers, and I was like, man, IFL just made it so much more easy on defense. And he's like, how? I'm like, oh, you'll see in the championship game. You'll see. So that's all I said. But it's about to get lit.
No, it's definitely interesting, and it's gonna. I think it's gonna have a dramatic effect on the game one way or another. I don't think that games are gonna be any less exciting. It's just gonna adjust how we watch games, in my personal opinion. So, real quick, we're gonna hit a quick commercial. For all of you guys watching, we really appreciate you all tuning in this early with us. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that like button. Share, comment. We want to hear your thoughts on all of these topics that we're talking about. So real quick, before we hit this commercial, drop your thoughts in the comments about these rule changes. How big do you think they are? Are you concerned about lower scoring games? Basically just whatever you have to say about these rules, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the NAL. How's it going, everybody? We are back. We're going to talk some National Arena League now. Let's go ahead and kick off with some more rules talk. Obviously, the NAL has kind of made some huge adjustments over the past couple of years to their rule set. They're now in year 2 of indoor rule set. I'm kind of curious. TJ, we'll go to our resident NAL coach first. You are the former NAL coaching member of the staff at the moment on the screen. So I'm curious what your thoughts are after year 1, heading into year 2, what it's going to look like. Do you think teams are going to be more adapted to this rule set? Did it really not make an effect in your opinion? What are your thoughts?
I think they're definitely going to be more acclimated this season. Now that you have a whole year under your belt, again, like we were talking with the IFL, they have a whole year of film and play calling with the new rules and the adjustments that they had to make. Me personally, I mean, I'm more geared towards arena rules. So I'm not a huge fan of the indoor rules that they're switching to, but it's going to be interesting. They wanted to differentiate themselves a little bit, add some new twists, which is cool. But yeah, I honestly, I think it's probably going to not make too much of a difference this year. Now that they had a whole year to play under the rules and get used to them.
Definitely makes sense. Krish, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree with TJ. I mean, I feel like a lot of the coaches, if not all the coaches in the NAL, have indoor experience, right? Even you go down to Beaumont, Coy Manfred, he coached with the San Antonio AFLA team, in 2018. So they played indoor rules, right? So he has experience with that. And I just think, I think all the coaches have experience. Now, whether it's good experience or bad experience, that's a topic for another day. But, yeah.
Makes sense. Trey, I know you're kind of new to the NAL to a certain extent. What are your thoughts about them ultimately adapting to the indoor rules last season, and with the addition of some other teams that have kind of played some arena rule set over the past couple of years? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting to see the game evolve in different leagues, and like we just talked about with the IFL and how their rules changed, and then obviously with AF1 doing the more traditional arena rule set. I don't think there's anything wrong with going to the indoor rules as long as like everyone's committed to it and everyone's on the same page with it. So yeah, like you said, I'm newer to the NAL. I know it's been around. I just didn't pay as much attention to it, but this year I'm gonna be a little more locked in with it, so I'll be able to contribute to these conversations a little bit more. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to be able to shift over to the indoor rules.
Definitely makes sense. I mean, honestly, a lot of these teams have kind of played indoor rules in the past, so it's a situation where a lot of them were already adept to it, and they know exactly what they were talking about and how they had to adapt to those rule sets before they even came in. I think Carolina was the main team that really needed to learn the rule set last season, so they were at a little bit of a disadvantage. It'll be interesting to see that staff in 2025 and see how they've kind of progressed as time has gone. Especially with Deron Clark and Mike Bonner there this season. Krish, can you kind of lead the charge for a sec? I got to step away for a moment.
Yeah, so, guys, I just wanted to ask you all about, the new teams coming in the NAL. Obviously, we got Beaumont, Shreveport, Wheeling. Out of those three teams, which team do you think will be the most successful?
So based off of the previews that I've watched and some of the information I've consumed, a lot of folks are high on Wheeling, and I understand it. They were absolutely dominant last year, but I think it's okay to tap. You don't have to slam on the brakes, but tap the brake of this car and be able to say like, well, the league difference is a little bit different from what they were in last year. And granted, they've signed some really great players to help with that step up, but. Yeah, a lot of folks are high on them, but I think Beaumont has signed some really solid players, and they looked really, really good in their preseason game. So I think Beaumont's going to be an interesting one to keep your eye on to make an impact as one of the brand new expansion teams in the NAL.
What about you, TJ?
Yeah, I'd have to go with Wheeling as well. Obviously, Trey touched on it. They were kind of in. They were kind of like the big brother and the little brother league last year. But at the end of the day, hey, they were able to boat race. They got the chip. And, you can't, to a certain extent, yeah, they chose the league, but at the same time, they didn't choose their opponents. And, at the end of the day, they beat who was on their schedule. So I think they'll be coming in, they're also hearing all this chatter about, oh, well, they were in a quote unquote scrub league last year or whatever. So they're coming in with a little chip on their shoulder and wanting to prove that we might have been in a different league last year, but we're still really good, and we're gonna show you guys. And then again, yeah, I would go with Beaumont in second as well because they've made some splash signings. They have a good staff. But Wheeling would be number one for me just because of the chip on their shoulder and the fact that they're coming off of a championship in a different league.
And I think that's a great point about they weren't just beating teams by a field goal or like a touchdown. They were absolutely smacking teams last year. So I think that's an important distinction to make is that they're not just stepping up like put it in college football terms. They're not like in the Mountain West barely beating their opponents. They're absolutely smacking them around. So yeah, I think that's a good call out.
I agree, and I think, Josh Resinala, the best coach in the NAL, is not even close. TJ, my specific question for you is, if you look at the NAL from a dynamic build perspective, which team do you think models? I know it's different rules and it's hard to tell, but which teams model your team that you had in Lehigh Valley?
I honestly I don't want to give anybody that jinx because I was part of the team that did not win a single game all year. And we also had over 90 guys dress for games that season because we were just trying our hardest just to win one game. So I'm going to not necessarily answer that question just because I don't want to insult anybody.
Trey, I wanted to ask you, you cover indoor arena. When you see a guy transition from the AF1, there's a couple of them in the NAL. Do you expect them to have immediate success? Or do you think, due to the level of talent, they might struggle a little bit? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on the position just because the different rule sets affect different positions differently, right? So especially with the indoor game being a little bit more dual threat mobile quarterback friendly than the arena game. If it's a quarterback, it really depends on what their strength is. If it's a wide receiver, it depends on what the strength of their quarterback is. So I think it kind of depends, but I don't think the talent gap is necessarily hit dramatically one way or another with these leagues. It's just a matter of getting the right group of guys together and being able to make it work. But yeah, I think it depends. I know that's not a great answer, but yeah, it just depends on the position, I think.
What about you, TJ?
Honestly, I think out of the other two true, we'll say, arena and indoor leagues, since the TAL is kind of its own thing, I would say honestly, the NAL is probably the most wide open, just because they are just so close together with players and coaches and stuff. I mean, obviously, you have, two or three favorites, but for the most part, it's like, you don't see one team completely burning out. They should all it should really be a highly competitive season. I haven't always been the biggest NAL supporter per se, but I do honestly think that they'll probably be the most competitive league just based on how all the teams are built and all the coaching staffs are put together and assembled.
Trey, I think one thing, you kind of pride yourself on when you follow these indoor arena, and same as me, is guys moving up to the next level, right? UFL,
Yeah.
CFL, NFL. You look at the IFL this offseason, 9 guys have signed with the CFL alone. AF1 last year had, I believe, 12 move up to the UFL, CFL, or NFL. The NAL has 0 from last year. So
Right.
what do you think the NAL can do to kind of promote their players and bring them to bigger stages?
I think there's a couple things. I think depending on your perspective, it kind of comes down to coaching staffs. Like you mentioned with the IFL having those coaching staffs that have those direct ties. I think being a little bit more intentional with your hiring would help with that, to just be able to have those conversations. Like you look at somebody like Coach Mike out in Vegas. He has helped a ton of people get up to the CFL, and some folks not even on his team. Like just other folks in the IFL, he's been able to help get up there. So being a little bit more intentional with coaching hires would help with that. But I also think just leveraging social media to its fullest extent. I don't think very many leagues have done it really, really well. I think some leagues do it pretty good. Some leagues do it okay. But just being able to showcase like, hey, if there's a big play, you should be shouting it from the mountaintops that, hey, this player just made this awesome play. Or, hey, this player had 19 catches for 300 yards. That's a big deal. Like we should be making a big deal out of these players really excelling and really doing a good job.
That's honestly a great point. I'm super excited somebody brought that up, because I feel like the IFL definitely did a pretty solid job of doing that last season. We heard multiple times over they had plays on SportsCenter and stuff like that. So I think it really is just kind of per case basis. And also I kind of think that there was a stigma heading into last season that the NAL didn't have the indoor rule set, which really kind of lends itself to outdoor players. So, I mean, that's one thing as well. And honestly, we didn't discuss on it or touch on it too much with the IFL rule change, but I think that's where a lot of their rule set changes came from, is ultimately making this a better transition to the outdoor game, which I think will ultimately affect them positively when it comes to getting more players outdoors in 2026. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that goes as well. Krish, any other thoughts on that?
I kind of want to address a comment, that we have from this comment right here. I love it. I think, this is what I try to provide with my rankings, right? I know my rankings, Coach McGurlin thinks my rankings are so bad, but he talks about it every Monday. So, I live rent free. But at the end of the day, like, for me, I think you got to know who the guys in the league are. If you ask any casual NAL fan, they'll be like Tommy Armstrong, even though he doesn't play in the league, right? You got to know who your stars are. And there's so many talented players in the NAL. I've been doing research, like watching film, watching games from college film, previous arena film. It's opened my eyes to how many talented players there are in the NAL. Like, there are so many guys who are underlooked and underappreciated that play for these little teams that no one talks about. And I'm telling you, you'll see it this year. Like, Beaumont has a lot of good players, under the radar guys that you never heard of. But I think it's important for the NAL to promote their guys. Do a player ranking, right? Do a top 10 players in the league, 1 through 10. Who are the best guys? With their social media handles, so fans can follow. And I'm sure you'll see an increase. with those guys. Promote them, brand posters. Colorado, they had a billboard outside the stadium with Steve Newbold, Jason Whitaker, and Jeremiah Thompson. Obviously, 2 out of 3 guys, whatever. But still, the thought counts, right? And it just promote. That's all you can do, really.
That's a great point. That is huge too. Local promotion is almost more important than the national promotion of social media and whatnot. So one thing that we have not discussed yet, I wanted to kind of get your guys' thoughts, is the Right Now TV partnership. But before we do that, we need to welcome on our other host for this morning, Chad Roland. Chad, how you doing this morning?
I'm good, guys. About yourself? Sorry for the late introduction here.
That's all good, man. Don't even worry about it. This is, I believe, your first episode with us on this one. So
yeah, I believe so.
Definitely can be forgiven. Obviously you're not kind of used to the schedule quite yet. My children make it so I have to do shows a little bit earlier. So
there you go. Makes sense.
He still somehow woke up during the show. Real quick, what are your thoughts on the Right Now TV partnership? I know you've kind of expressed some of your concerns in the chat, so I wanted to get you first.
Yeah, it's interesting that with the TV partnerships and stuff, like I really just wanted to see the announcement like just come soon, right? Because for the IFL, I think this is really like the perfect time to get this stuff out there, right? With all the stuff that's been happening with the other leagues and everything else, I feel like it's a great opportunity for the IFL to really just showcase their, what I feel like is their tier A, right? And hopefully with the IFL, I've heard different things, right? I've heard it's going to be their own little IFL Plus type of ordeal with a paywall. I've heard they're going to be, the possibility of a streaming partnership with like Flow Football, for example. I know the ECHL does Flow Hockey partnership, so that could be something. I feel like a lot of the things that the IFL is going to do is going to probably mimic what the ECHL does, just because of the success of ownership groups that have come from the ECHL over to the IFL.
Definitely agree on that for sure. Ultimately, let's go to Krish next. Krish, what are your thoughts on the Right Now TV partnership for the NAL?
Yeah, so me and Brandon Acard, we have good dialogue, or we did at least. But I think he's a great commissioner. He's young, he's innovative. He has his GOAT sports marketing. He's getting all the NAL teams to have great merch, which is something the IFL doesn't have a centralized merch store, and the NAL does. Can you imagine? But I think it's really impressive what Brandon Acard is doing. I think Right Now TV is great. Anything that adds a little flavor to the league, I'm totally with. I think, Right Now TV, I've tried to access it. Obviously Griff Carl was posting the link for the preseason game, but, he doesn't really know how to access technology. So I knew Beaumont was never going to be streamed, but I hope they're streamed tonight because we need the games on Right Now TV. We need to see what Right Now TV looks like before we get the playoff time or end the season, and then the stream not working, and then it's like, we can't watch the game. So I hope it works. But I watched Japanese sumo wrestling on the night that Beaumont was supposed to be on, so I got used to the platform. It worked pretty well, so I'm excited.
There you go. Who thought we were going to talk about Japanese sumo wrestling while we're on an indoor football show? But leave it up to Krish to bring up things that we just never thought would be talked about. TJ, what are your thoughts on the Right Now TV partnership?
I think it's good that they're moving forward, trying to get some kind of a platform going. But like Chris said, I want to see it in action because it's even with the NFL with the Netflix, it was a big concern because of how a fight night on Netflix kept freezing and everything else. And you don't want to be, like he said again, in a playoff game or something, and all of a sudden it freezes for 5 minutes and you can't see any of the action. But all indications are it's a good situation. It's helping the league trend up a little bit because now they're actually getting some broadcast partnership to get out there more than just on YouTube. But again, I want to see it in action. So hopefully they get it running either tonight or next week or something because I definitely want to take it in. And if it's as good as Evergreen Now, at least appears to be for the AF1, then it's going to be a really great partnership.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Honestly. I'm curious to see how it helps grow the game. I mean, ultimately, that's the goal for all of these leagues, right? Is they want to grow their viewership. They want to bring in casual fans that maybe aren't like us, that know, almost every detail there is to know about all these teams. So I'm curious to see if we do see a lot more casual fans around. And another side of that is the stuff has to be on point when it comes to the streams. I mean, if we're watching this and all of a sudden it's glitching out, you have audio issues, stuff like that, stuff diehard fans have lived with for years, that's gonna turn off some people that are not, indoor arena football nuts. So that's gonna be one thing that I'm a little concerned by with all these new programs coming into the fray. We saw a lot of issues with Stadium last season. We saw a lot of issues with Vire. All these different new streaming platforms that we used last season. So I'm definitely very curious to see how this works for Right Now TV. But let's go to Trey. What are your thoughts ultimately on the Right Now TV? And have you had any experience with them up to this point?
I have not, but when you said Stadium, a chill went down my spine from the playoffs last year. I just, that was not great. But yeah, I think Right Now is an interesting spot because they are a little bit more established. And I think it's a great partnership for both sides because streaming platforms like that benefit very, very much from live sports. So I think that's something where it's a perfect fit for Right Now because they get into the live sports game. I was clicking through their website as you guys were talking here, and it seems like they have something in the works with the IFA as well. So it seems like they're really leaning into some of these smaller football leagues that have the potential to grow. But I just think getting more eyes on the product for the NAL is a good thing. And I think it just depends. Like you said, technically, will it hold up over time? Will the individual teams be able to provide the hardware, software on site to be able to make this a good partnership? So a lot of moving parts, but if everyone does their job and does what they need to do, it can be a really good thing for the league.
Completely agree. And that is the big question here. I mean, ultimately, as Wookie pointed out, if the streams are crisp, it's going to go a long way toward making sure these teams get that extra exposure that they're looking for with Right Now TV. So definitely curious to see how that works out. And ultimately, we'll find out real quick if this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. But real quick, we're going to hit one more commercial, and then we'll move on to the AF1, which there's a lot to talk about. It does look like our guest has not ultimately shown up for the show. It's early. We get it. Completely will, forgive him for this one. He'll be on in the future again. For anybody who didn't know, we were going to have LaRoche Jackson on from Salina, the defensive coordinator. Has been on in the past. He'll be on in the future. No hard feelings there. So we will definitely move on and jump into the AF1.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
All right, so let's go ahead and kind of transition into the AF1. There's a lot to talk about. I'm not even sure where to start today, to be honest. We had a bunch of different topics on this one. From whether it's the new streaming partnerships with Vice TV, Evergreen Now, to the betting partnership with Bettors. Man, I'm forgetting the name at the top of my head. I'm terrible at this, apparently.
Better Edge.
I was going to say Bettors Now, but I know that wasn't correct. And then also the Real American Beer partnership, the Alt Fantasy Sports partnership. So, any subject you guys want to touch on first before we get into the nitty gritty?
I will say before we get too far down the rabbit hole here with some of these things, I do like what the league is doing at the league level with these partnerships. I think they're setting themselves up for success long term, getting to the finish line with some of the individual, or getting to the starting line rather, with some of the individual teams has proven a little dicey, but we'll get to that in a second. But I love the macro vision of the league to be able to partner with some of these things. I think the Better Edge partnership and the Alt Fantasy Sports partnership, they're going to be huge for the league once games get going, because fantasy sports has been around for years and years and years. Sports betting is not going anywhere, and I think that just draws more eyes to the game, similar to what a good streaming service would also do. So I think it's good what they're doing at the league level. Just hopefully some of the teams can get their act together and really start to do what they need to do to grow this thing out and expand from here.
It's definitely, I love what they're doing on the national level for the league. I mean, honestly, I personally, again, I don't want to get in too far into the weeds here, but I think the fact that they've got fantasy sports, that's a whole different market that has not been tapped by most of these other leagues. I know the IFL had opportunities to explore fantasy sports. I know the NAL has kind of dipped a toe in, but they never really ended up going that route. And then here we have the AF1 finally going full in on fantasy sports, which I think is huge. That's one of those things that's going to draw in casual fans. I've always really enjoyed fantasy football myself with the NFL, and that's one of the things that really kind of got me into following all the different teams, not just my team, which is obviously Philadelphia, as you guys can see behind me. But, you kind of begin to learn more about the players that are up and coming, the guys that look like they're going to be promising players, that look like they have a large role in their teams. So that I think that's going to be big for the sport in general, for arena football, for indoor football in general. And hopefully these other leagues follow suit, because I would love to personally play some IFL fantasy sports, and ultimately NAL as well. So, I mean, hopefully that's something that we get into eventually in the near future. Alt Fantasy Sports has been doing this for years. They've provided XFL, they've provided UFL, so I'm definitely curious to see how that progresses into the future. But any other thoughts on these national partnerships? Let's go to Chad first.
Yeah, I think you guys have all kind of already nailed it on the head here, right? The more exposure we could get to the AF1, the better, right? And obviously they have their things that are going on, but like he said, on a national level, this is good, right? To see all these different type of sponsorships, and like you said, all that does is just bring in the casual fan, right? There may be somebody that follows the alt fantasy sports that really wants to jump in, and I've always said, the easiest way to learn about a football league is or any type of league is by fantasy sports, right? Because you're really concentrating on the players, and you're concentrating on the teams, and you're watching more games than usual because you're following all these other teams. Even people that are liking the sponsorship for the Real American Beer, right? I mean, that's if they follow that world and follow because of the fact of Hulk Hogan being a part of that, the wrestling world, people may want to start watching AF1 football. So it's always a good thing to have these national sponsorships. The more you can have, the better, I feel like.
Can we bring back the XFL 1.0 scrum for the kickoff, or the coin toss? I would love to see that. Krish, what are your thoughts on the partnerships that the AF1 has brought about, and how big do you think it is for the growth of the sport?
Well, first off, my favorite partnership is the betting partnership, right? I mean, the fact that I can bet a stack on my boy Trey Long to go over 3 receptions. I mean, bro, I'm so excited. I'm about to make bank on these guys, knowing the inside scoop and stuff. But I'm really, really excited. I think it adds a different level. Like you said, the UFL, it might not be entertaining to watch all the time. But if you have money on it, money makes everything entertaining. Everything. And so I'm loving it. The fantasy sports is cool. The website is a little funny. I want to see a better layout, a more dynamic layout, but I like it. I'm with it.
I think that's a great point. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not bashing alt fantasy sports. I love what they've been doing for the alt football leagues over the past couple of years. There's definitely room for improvement. I think if you talk to the guys with the website, they would say the same thing, and they are working to improve it. I've talked to a couple of the guys there, so I'm very, very curious to see how they continue into the future. TJ, I know you are a betting aficionado. How do you feel about the betting partnerships, the fantasy sports, all of this stuff?
I'm never going to recover financially. Ooh, no. I think it's awesome. I mean, you know, for me personally, like Chris said, I live in Pennsylvania, and who cares about East Carolina versus Charlotte in college football? I did because I bet on the over. So it's going to get more people in. It's going to the more fan interaction, whether it's the casual or the already extreme or diehard fan, the more you can get out of that, the better your league is. They're hitting, I mean, you look at what they've hit on. They've hit on beer, fantasy, and sports betting. Those are like the three biggest like vices of Americans, in the sports world. So, I think on that level they're doing good, but hopefully they can, overcome some of the other shortcomings that have suddenly popped up. But in terms of sponsorships, they're definitely hitting it all. Again with the streaming partners and now all these sponsorships and everything. I'll be interested to see how it goes, but it's definitely going to help the most important part, which is the casual fan, to get kind of sucked into it.
That's the big thing here, right? We keep talking about that. You've heard that buzzword probably 10 times already just since we started talking about these national partnerships. It's all to draw in the casual fan. We're here. The diehards are here. We're going to watch it whether the stream sucks or not, typically, whether there's all fantasy sports or not, whether there's betting or not. Typically, we are going to be there one way or another. So, honestly, this is huge for the league. And ultimately, I hope that it is ultimately a huge thing for the growth of the game as a whole. If we get more people watching the AF1, maybe they become IFL fans and NAL fans, and all of a sudden the sport as a whole grows. So, each little partnership that can kind of put these leagues on the map is good for all of them, as goofy as that kind of sounds. So, thank you to Zach Kyleman for tuning in. We're really excited to see you in the comments, brother. We'll definitely have to get you on for an episode later on this season. Real quick before we move on to the next subject, just wanted to say once again thank you to Trey from Off the Wall for coming and joining us today. Super excited to have him on. If you haven't done so already, hop over to Twitter or your favorite social media app. Make sure you're following Off the Wall. A lot of great interviews, a lot of great content coming out all the time. Super excited once again to have him on. One of the subjects that we have not brought up as of yet that I'm really excited to talk about and get your guys' input on is the waiver wire of the AF1. Now, you guys know me. I'm not necessarily a historian of indoor football by any stretch. I do follow the leagues very closely. I've personally never seen this done. So I'm curious, what are you guys' thoughts on having a waiver wire order in, first of all, a league that doesn't have, 32 teams, but also on the surface, it affects players on possibly an even bigger level at this height of football. So let's go to Chad first on this one. Chad, what are your thoughts on a waiver wire in the AF1?
Yeah, it's a little it's a little interesting, right? Especially as you mentioned, in a league this size to have that waiver wire. I'm not really a particular fan of it, right? I mean, I understand what the waiver wire does and what it can do and the fairness it's supposed to bring, but at the end of the day, I don't know if this is the right idea for the AF1 to go down with the waiver wire. I mean, as you said, you're affecting the players and this and that when it comes to, okay, well, now I have no choice to go to this spot, right? So, like I said, I think if you're in a bigger league, maybe IFL size is like the minimum size that I would maybe say that you could do that with, but even then, I'd still be a little sketchy on that part. But yeah, so I'm not really a particular big fan of it.
TJ, as a former coach, what are your thoughts on the waiver wire?
I am also not a big fan of it. Just speaking from experience, we're not at this level. We're not even the UFL or the CFL or NFL where guys are willing to cut their finger off to get a spot. Sometimes it is hard enough just to get guys to fill your team and to better your team. And now, the waiver order it kind of complicates it a little bit. It just adds a little bit more confusion and a little bit more frustration. If especially if you're a team where, last year at this time, you could have gotten that guy easily. But now, you put in for the guy and somebody else ahead of you says, no, you know what, we want him instead. That's going to create a lot of animosity. I see what they were thinking, but I also agree with Chad. When you have this small of a league, it doesn't really make too much logistical sense for me.
That's my big thing as well. But Trey, I want to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think about the AF1 waiver wire?
I think it's good. It could probably use a little work, but I think it's a good thing to have just to keep some of the balance of the rosters in place. Like TJ mentioned, that with animosity between teams, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If we're being honest, like I think we've all been in that situation where in your fantasy football league, right, where you may have the first fantasy or first waiver wire priority. Your buddy needs a quarterback, but you don't want him to have that quarterback. I think there's a little bit of gamesmanship with it too, where it's like, all right, let me utilize this waiver positioning. So I think there's a lot to it that can be really good. I think it could provide a really good balance across the league, because let's be honest, if most of the players could just choose where they want to go, they'd probably be very top heavy with the Billings and Albanys, right? So being able to help out some of those teams that may not necessarily be destination choices on the surface, I think is never a bad thing.
Great point. Krish, what are your thoughts on the waiver wire?
I want to offer perspective where the waiver wire can go south. So Billings had a defensive lineman from Arkansas State. He was signed with Pirates last year, so I know him well. Kevin Thurman, right? Kevin Thurman is a freak. He played in the UFL, great player, signed with Billings. He first goes on refuse to report. Then he goes on short-term IR. Then he's at camp, I guess. Then he gets released after a day. Then he goes to waivers to Salina. He's not going to Salina. And then he just doesn't show up. So a player like that is always going to dictate their own future. And players are always going to have power to decide where they go, right? So when we get later in the season, right, if we have teams that might be winless or one win, a player of that caliber getting released, say a team added someone else, or, they have a lot of depth, that player is going to have a choice on where they want to go. I think the waiver wire affects players that might not be as well known. So, younger guys who really have rookies, that's who it affects the most, in my opinion.
That's an interesting take. It definitely is. And that's one thing that I have some concerns about. So, Krish brought up a great point with the Kevin Thurman that was released by Billings. If he decides that he doesn't want to go to Salina, what happens? He gets put on the refuse to report list. So essentially there's some gamesmanship there as well. If you know a player is not going to come to you, you've talked to him or whatever, you still can put in a claim on that guy, put him on the refuse to report list, and force his hand. You're either playing in the AF1 or you're going to another league, buddy. And at this point, you might not find another team. So that's an interesting part of this that I really hadn't thought too much about. But I mean, there are some situations where there are guys that are just not going to go play in the middle of Kansas, or they're not going to go play in, Florida when they're from California, or maybe they don't want to play for a certain coach. And, there's so many different leagues at this level that they do have some form of power to be able to go pursue opportunities in other leagues rather than, go from, one NFL team to another like it works in the big leagues. So that's definitely a whole different aspect of this that I hadn't really thought about. And on that same front, I wanted to kind of talk about some of these trades that were made recently. We saw Oregon make a couple of trades. First of all, one with Orlando. Trey, I think you pointed it out that Dalton Cole got out of Orlando right in time, right before they folded, which, by the way, I think Dalton Cole is keep an eye on that kid. I think he could be very valuable for Oregon. But then there was also a couple offensive linemen and waiver priority traded from Billings to Oregon, which I thought was interesting. So let's go to Trey first on this one. What are your thoughts on the trades overall? How do you think they affect some of these players? And then also, what did you make about the ability to trade waiver order priority?
I think the waiver thing, it can be really cool. And I think we'll have to wait to see how it plays out in real time and how it actually goes down. But being able to see like, hey, I traded the 10th waiver position for the 3rd waiver position and exchanging players. I think it's another creative way that teams can, exchange value and help each other out. Yeah, and like you mentioned with the Oregon Orlando trade, I thought that was very interesting. Future considerations, like you typically see that in basketball and in baseball, but now we're seeing it in arena football. So, but I don't think we'll see how future considerations may work out. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I don't know. But the first couple of trades were interesting ones to kind of see what the standard of trades could be going forward.
Definitely agree on that. That's interesting to see as well. I know one of the guys that was traded to Oregon has already been let go. So that was a whole nother interesting facet about this. Oregon was desperate for some offensive linemen. Obviously, they go make a trade to bring 2 in, and one's already gone. So, does that guy latch on with another team? Did he even show up in Oregon? That's a whole different spiel.
Does he go back to Billings?
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different facets to this. Yeah. Chad, what are your thoughts on these trades, and then ultimately how they affect these players of this level?
Yeah, I mean, first off, for the guys that got traded out of Orlando, I mean, look at them, right? I mean, just right in the nick of time to get out of that hot mess. But, it's kind of like what Trey pointed out, right? Like when Trey talked about the waiver wire, I actually kind of became intrigued because it's like, okay, now I kind of understand what you're talking about here because there is a lot of strategy involved. You see that in baseball and football as well. And now it's kind of like, a player to be named later or a prospect to be named later in baseball stuff. And so, the waiver wire trade part was really interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen that before anywhere, but, I guess it adds another element to that waiver wire part. So, the strategy once again kicks in. But it's, for some of these players, you get traded it happens a lot in sports, right? You get a trade and then you see some of those players that get traded cut not too long after that. It may have cleared up cap space or whatever they were trying to do with it at the time. But the trades have been pretty interesting, seeing the players going to these different teams and stuff. But I was really intrigued by the waiver wire part because, like I said, I've just never seen that before.
Completely agree. It's one of those things that it just adds more intrigue to all these different transactions. I mean, I'm kind of a nut as far as the transactions go. I kind of like to see all the movement and see how it affects the league. So I'm definitely curious to see how the waiver wire and everything continues to affect these players, and hopefully it's not in a negative manner. I know a lot of times they're not making the kind of money that the NFL is. A lot of these teams aren't necessarily shelling out of pocket to fly them into town as well. So that's a whole different aspect that we haven't even really touched on quite yet. TJ, what are your thoughts on these trades and how they affect the players?
Yeah, I feel like for whatever I mean, maybe I just never paid as much attention to it, but it feels like there are a lot more trades happening. Is that because of it? Would it have happened regardless? I'm not sure. Are they just publicizing it better now? I don't know. But I do know, to touch on the Dalton Cole trade, that future considerations definitely worked out for Oregon, at least for the time being right now. Uh, but it adds a pretty cool element. I've never really seen it happen before at least this level. So it'll be interesting to see how it progresses throughout the season. Because, I'm sure, coaches and general managers that also have never really dealt with it are still kind of feeling it out and trying to really get the whole process of how it works down pat. But it should definitely it definitely adds a level of intrigue, like what's already been said.
Definitely agree on that front. Krish, if you're still with us, what are your thoughts on these trades? I know that you had mentioned you were actually the one that brought it to my attention that Dalton Cole had been traded. So I'm curious what your thoughts on that are.
TJ, I think, again, it's the same thing with the waiver wire, right? Guys can dictate where they want to go. And it can be great. You can trade for a guy. And I feel like it's always going to be future consideration. We might see a trade where, one, player goes and then 2 players go to another team, but future consideration, which basically means a free roster spot. That's all that means. right? And so a team is probably doing a guy a favor. There's teams out there that they like. I'll be honest, Coach Manas in San Antonio with the IFL, he makes it a priority to do his guy a favor. If they don't do well in camp or they have a bad camp or they get cut, instead of cutting them, if they're good enough, like on that brink to make the team, he'll call up another coach. Hey, can I trade this player? That's what happened with Washington Wolfpack starting quarterback Joseph Petts. He was with Albany. He instead of cutting him, Manas traded him, and he went to Orlando, and that's how he's at where he's at now. So I think it really is interesting to me because it shows with coaches in a way kind of care for their players and look out for them.
No, I definitely agree on that. We've had some really good luck with the past couple of years where coaches will do that. They will try to help players out. And I can actually speak on the fact that Orlando has done that a lot recently. You've seen on social media that EJ Burt is out there trying to help players find new landing spots. That's a whole different side of this game that you will not see at the next level. If you're in the NFL and you get cut, sometimes, a team will come in and try to, make a last second trade. But honestly, that's on the other teams. It's not on the coach that's out there calling other teams. So, kudos to EJ Burt, kudos to Tom Manas, kudos to Mike Davis, who I know does that as well. All you guys are taking care of these players, and it's huge. Chad, I know we've kind of let you sit there quietly for a little bit. What are your thoughts on these trades, buddy?
Yeah, it's kind of like I already mentioned, right? It's just with the players, switching sides. What it does too, as well, depending on I don't want to say it like this, but the level of player that they are, as a broadcaster, it always makes an interesting storyline, right? That's another thing, people may not think about on that side, but if you got a player traded from one team to another, and that's a rival type team, right? If they face each other down the road in a serious situation for like playoff seeding or even in a playoff game period, it brings another element of story to that game, right? Because that's what, a lot of this is about too, is the storylines. People follow storylines in different leagues. And so, trades can make those stories even more interesting than they already are.
No, I definitely agree. And that is one thing as well. Like what happens in a situation like, you get cut from one team and you get traded to the next team. It just so happens you play that team the next week. So all of a sudden that adds a whole nother level of intrigue to the game. So that's a great perspective. And it's honestly something that I think can add another layer to storylines in games, which is always awesome to see.
You hear about it all the time when it comes to like the drafts, for example, in the NFL, right? Like when any draft doesn't matter really, but the players like, hey, these 7 teams passed on me. I'm going to make sure those 7 teams remember my name, right? It's the same situation. So if a team, because when you're a player, TJ probably knows this, as well as anybody, but when you're a player and you get traded, you feel like that team just gave up on you, right? And so when you get traded to like Oregon, for example, you want to make sure when Oregon plays Orlando or whoever, you want to make sure like, hey, like I want to do everything I can. I'm going to bring my A game against that team. And so that just, like I said, it just adds another element to the story of that team. And it could maybe even develop a rivalry with that game as well.
Agreed. And that's a whole nother side of things that, we could be sitting here talking all day about the different rivalries that are kind of growing out of the sport. Zach mentions too many good talents on these closed up teams that should be playing. Circumstances with recent situations have really frustrated me. Frustrations towards certain owners, of course. And that is definitely our next topic at hand. I've seen a lot of comments. What's the update on the Arizona Bandits? So on that note, man, well, let's let Trey start this one. Trey, you posted something last night about the lease agreement for Arizona. Can you elaborate on what that post was?
Yeah, so I've been following the Arizona situation very closely. The Bandits have arguably one of the most talented rosters in all of indoor and arena football, but seems like off the field stuff they haven't been able to get figured out. And so I've been poking and prodding, being like, hey, what's going on with Arizona? And they haven't announced their arena yet. And I think everyone I won't say everyone, I will say all the hardcores out there have been like, where are they playing? Where are they playing? People have assumed where they've been playing based on some things that have been posted here or there. But yeah, it seems like the reason why they haven't announced their arena was due to the fact that they have failed to pay their deposit for an arena lease, which is pretty important for any type of lease, whether it's a housing lease, a car lease, an arena lease. You got to fulfill those obligations. So yeah, it's a frustrating situation, and it seems like if they haven't officially announced it yet, the inevitable is coming with Arizona in particular. But yeah, it's a super frustrating situation for very, very many people. I know the league has been trying their best to make it work, but like it's frustrating because from a coverage perspective, last year it seemed like there were a lot of macro level issues with the league itself. This year, it seems like a lot of the issues that we're seeing are very much micro level, where it's the teams not getting their act together and the teams not being able to fulfill what they had to do to be able to make things work. So I think as a whole, the league should be good moving forward. I have faith in the leadership and what they're doing, but the individual teams have to fulfill their individual obligations.
Agreed. And honestly, it's one of my frustrations with the league as a whole. I don't want to knock anybody in the leadership department, and I'm not about to sit here on my soapbox and tell them I could do a better job, but there has got to be a better way of vetting these teams. There has got to be a better way of verifying that they have these things in place long before 24 hours before kickoff of the season. Like, what are we doing here at this point that we're watching this happen again in 2025 after we watched everything happen in 2024 and sat there and pointed the blame on Lee Hutton and we pointed the blame on Travell Gaines? Well, I'm not going to sit here and say those guys were faultless at this point, because obviously they were at fault for the way the 2024 league went. But for us to repeat these same mistakes in 2025 and not learn from previous mistakes, whether it was the AFL, the NAL, all these different leagues that have had issues, what are we doing? I've got a lot of respect for Jerry Kurz. I've got a lot of respect for Jeff Fisher. I've got a lot of respect for Gary Compton, for all these different people, Steven Titus, Mike Korda, all the different people that are really thoroughly involved with this league, that I really believed this year was going to be a better iteration of what happened last year. I didn't think we were going to have these stability issues, but here we are. Less than a week before the first game of the season, Orlando decides to fold. They were 4 days away from kickoff of their season. They were supposed to be playing today's game against Southwest Kansas, and now they're gone, for lack of a better term, Thanos into the universe, because they're just vamoosed. So it's frustrating on a whole nother level. Guys like Zach Kyleman, he was the media person for Arizona, and honestly, in my opinion, one of the better people you could have hired for this position with Arizona. And now he's gone because of, obligations not being met, which he pointed out last night on Twitter as well. Actually retweeted Trey's post and put that out there as well. So I'm not saying anything that he hasn't said publicly, but there's a whole different layer to this on the people side of things that really just drives me nuts. Is, we saw it with Orlando. I don't know how Arizona's players have been informed of their situation, but that's a whole nother thing. You're affecting people's lives. As an owner, are you going to take a hit? Absolutely, you are. I'm not trying to minimize what they're doing, what they're putting themselves out there with this money and financial investments. But at the same time, you're taking away a job from a person that could have been depending on it. Now, I would argue that, these people that are trying to make a full-time career out of football, you probably should do a little bit of research on a lot of these employers out there. I would definitely say that you need to be very, very cautious with who you take jobs with. But at the same time, you also need to understand that you should definitely have some other form of income if you're going to be doing this, because at any moment, with sometimes even no notice, that income is going to be taken away from you. So that's a whole nother thing that really kind of scares me. But I've kind of sat on my soapbox here a little bit too long. So Chad, what are your thoughts on the Arizona situation and how they could have handled it better?
Yeah, it's interesting to see how this is all played out, right? I mean, I know there was a guy that was a former Indianapolis Enforcer. I know I got the sweatshirt on today. Ahmad Butler that was signed in Arizona and then left eventually to go to the Ironman, up in Michigan. So it's not sure exactly what happened with that process. I don't know. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall earlier or something. Who knows? But I mean, to go this long and not have your stadium set, I mean, it's kind of just been the writing on the wall already, right? I think anybody that's really a purist of this league and it really just indoor football period has already seen what's going on, right? And we already all have been saying for weeks that this team's probably going to end up folding. And this is why I think, and not to try to bring the IFL into this, this is why I think when you're looking at ownership groups, this is why I have heard all these rumors about the IFL really trying to link hard with the ECHL because the ownership groups are really solid, right? You're always hearing a lot of rumors about Toledo. You're hearing rumors about Lake Tahoe with Tim Tebow's team. So you have all this, this solidified group, right? You go through the AF1 and, these guys, they're just having these issues. And last year, yes, as you mentioned, there was a lot of league stuff that was going on, right, with Lee Hutton and everything else. Now the league is actually doing everything, I think, correctly in a sense, right? You're going out and you're getting these sponsorships. You're trying to, make this a better product than what it was last season. I think the league itself has done a really good job with it. It's just the team owners, the league is over here saying, hey, we're doing our part. You guys got to step up and do yours, right? And that's where it's been falling around, right? That's where it's falling down, actually, because, when they announced expansion, that kind of got me a little scared about it too, right? When they announced Monterey and Wilkes-Barre and whatever else, that was a little scary. And now you've seen that kind of go to the wayside, right? Now you're seeing all this Orlando stuff that's going on, which is tragic to see. You haven't heard anything about Arizona, even though that seems imminent, but that's probably not going to happen. I mean, you got to have a place to play, right? So it's just not, really, it's tragic. It really is. And I feel sorry for the players because, they were all set and they were all gung ho and they're probably having practices and stuff, I'm assuming. Right. And, and now those players, I mean, the season's supposed to start today, right? So now you got players that if they do end up folding, now don't have any homes to go play, and they got to go spread out and try to figure out other teams to go to. So it's just, I just wish these teams would step up and do their part. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say and try to trash on any team ownerships or anything like that. But I think there needs to be a way better vetting process when it comes to the ownership groups. And like I said, maybe that's why the IFL is starting to lean into the ECHL side of things. Maybe the AF1 needs to do something like AHL, for example. I'm just throwing an example out there, but something to where they need to have a vetting process. Don't just say, hey, let's go ahead and expand because we need to expand our game, right? Expansion in a league sometimes doesn't work, right? If you don't have a solid base, it doesn't work. And I think they need to get back to the basics, get the base going, get good team ownership groups in, be solidified for a season or two. And in that process, do a 2-year vetting process. I believe Zach brought that up. 2-year vetting process would be awesome to see in this type of situation.
You are correct, sir. Zach is definitely, hitting the nail on the head on that one. Krish, I know you got to get running here soon, so I wanted to get your thoughts before you get out of here. What do you think about this Arizona situation? And if you wanted to give your thoughts on Orlando as well, feel free.
Yeah, so Arizona, right? I went out, I bought a T-shirt, right? $45 down the drain, right? Thank you, Matthew Mason, right? Scam artist. But at the end of the day, it's really, really frustrating to me. I mean, I got guys over there. I got Akil Greer, right? I got my boy Malik Henry. I got my boys over there, and they don't have a team to play for, right? And they're so excited. Okay, I'll say it on air, right? They told the guy that they would house him for the entire year. So imagine what's going through that guy's head. We're gonna house you for the entire year. Oh, telling your family, oh, I'm all set. I'm housed in Arizona, and then oh no, now it's just gone, right? So from that perspective, it's frustrating. Orlando, I have a personal connection with, right? So my former client, right, is down there in Orlando. Got him signed, great, through Coach Burt, whatever. He's sitting in a hotel in Orlando for the past 5 days. He has to pay for his own food, own everything, right? And, yeah, that was really gracious of them to give him till Sunday, but he doesn't know what he's going to do. Is he going to go back home? Is he going to stay in Orlando? Because the rumor is they might come back. There's no consistent direction. My solution to this is obviously vet teams. I just leadership for the AF1 has failed. I feel like, and I'm going to just be honest, I feel like we expected a lot better from them. And if one more team folds, at that point, the season's a dust. And not a dust, like, and they're still going to have a season, don't get me wrong, but it's just the presentation of it will look so bad if they have a 6-17 league. So bad. The NAL, me and my boy CJ, we joke every day, 2A, 2B. I was feeling 2A for a while. I was like, let's go. We got, NAL got the TV deal. AF1 got betting, fantasy, TV deal. Like, they were coming back hard. I'm like, okay, this is going good. And then the team folds. And then they do one positive step. Hulk Hogan thing last night. Amazing, right? Now, 10 steps back, right? So it's really hard to build a league this way, and I don't know how it's sustainable. One more thing about the Arizona Bandits. My thing is, so I've, obviously with my future and everything, I was in Wolf 10 scouting. I've left. I was doing the program with Ben McCoy, head scout of Wheeling, Northern Arizona. So we got a ton of connections, right? We're working with some Arizona Bandits players. If you're a Bandits player, reach out. We'll try our best to get you on a team. And that's just the goal, right? To get these players homes. And it's damage control. We call it damage control over here because, you got to go fast. You got to go fast. These teams' rosters fill up, right? There are no spots for players. But on a positive note, there's a lot of quality free agents from Orlando. Like Andre Sale, oh my God. I hope every team that needs a quarterback is calling Andre Sale. Like, I really hope that Clarence Williams, like, I saw Clarence posting on Facebook, I'm a free agent. No one liking. I'm like, dude, like, you know who this guy is? He's a top 5 receiver. But, some teams think a 10-year veteran receiver is better. But that's a different story. I think, at the end of the day, like, there's so many talented players out there. So many EJ Burt should be an assistant coach somewhere. Marcus Manuel should be a director of player personnel somewhere. So I just hope all these guys get homes, and I hope I see my boy Malik Henry out there. I hope this doesn't deter him from not wanting to play arena, right? I really hope it doesn't. And I know there'll be some guys, some really talented guys who are signed to these teams that will decide, no, I'm not playing arena because I don't want to deal with this crap. That's it. So.
Yeah, completely understand. Krish, thank you for joining us this morning for us, this evening for you. Mr. Worldwide on Shady Sports Network from India. So, I mean, man, talk about some dedication. So we really appreciate your time today, man. Thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, thank you, Trey, for coming. Really enjoyed having you, and I'm just really, really excited for tonight. I'll be staying up till 5 a.m. We got indoor football back. Some clowns are about to get exposed, but let's go. Really excited. See ya.
Absolutely. Have a good one. So, yeah, we've kind of talked about Arizona. I want to get TJ's thoughts on this one. I don't think we've asked you yet what your thoughts are on specifically Arizona, and then we can kind of shift gears and talk about Orlando a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, for people who have been watching arena football for a while, it's already been said the writing was kind of on the wall. If you don't have a signed agreement for an arena, probably at least 4 to 6 months before the season starts, it's not a good look. And the fact that, the league was trying and reports were coming out that it was, constantly, oh yeah, we're going to get it done, tomorrow. We're going to get it done next month. We're going to get it, I was hoping that it would be a different scenario because, I mean, as a longtime fan of this sport, it's just unfortunate. I'm like flat out just sick of this kind of thing happening. Same thing, touching on Orlando, it's things that really bring leagues down, even if it's not their fault, just because, they are the umbrella for the team. So if something goes wrong with that team, the league, by comparison, gets dragged down with it. Uh, I I was not a fan of their fast attempt to grow and expand so fast. Ironically, they ended with, like 8 teams last year. They're going to start with 8 teams this year, with the way things are looking. Maybe it was just meant to be. Hopefully, these last 8 teams are solidified. And it is my opinion that if anything else goes wrong, they cannot afford anything else. Make it through this whole season with the 8 teams that are now currently in place, and get to the end of the year, and it'll be considered a good year. Because but just by comparison for last year, this whole Bandits thing last night had me. I was sitting there thinking about it, and last season when this same kind of thing happened, it was a few games into the season. It turned into a hot mess real fast. Everyone was saying, "Oh, they're going to fold," blah blah blah. Well, now the current leadership came in, saved the day, got the league to limp across the finish line. The only good side or upside to it is all this is happening, albeit 1 to 4 days before the season starts, but still technically preseason. So again, if everything can be solidified with these 8 teams, the AF1 can salvage this and build for next year, but maybe don't try to literally double the size of your league in 1 year. It never works. Never works. One thing I learned in school is if you don't know history, you are bound to repeat it. They did it. Every league seems to do it. So hopefully they learn their lesson. But again, as soon as the between the arena and murmurs of players coming out saying they didn't know what was going on, the writing was on the wall for the Bandits. Unfortunately, I just hope the league again just continues to solidify and steady themselves from here on out, and we can actually celebrate today being the official opening day instead of fearing what news is going to break at like 3 o'clock today, because that's kind of how it's been going lately.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked to some people within the league as of late, and they basically told me, I got a quote from one person that said they felt like they've been hit by a truck. And then I've heard other guys say, it's just a matter of what news is coming on a day-to-day basis. And honestly, I don't want to say it's not fair, but I don't really have another term for it, because a lot of these guys are dedicating their lives, taking a lot of free time away from themselves to go and put forth a ton of effort into this league, sometimes their own money as well. So that's something that just really kind of irks me. And then on top of everything, I mean, with these teams backing out so late in the game, you immediately put more onus on other teams that are now having to deal with more or higher travel costs, scrambling at the last second to find opponents and stuff like that. That's just going to end up making it even more tough for these other teams to weather the storm this season. And we saw so much of this last season that I just had such high hopes for 2025 that it's really disappointing to see. But I don't know how you guys feel about it, and we're going to kind of get into it now. But to me, the one team that really just kind of blindsided me, a lot of these teams, they made sense. Arizona hadn't announced an arena, kind of saw this coming, as much as I hate to say it. One of the things that always scares me is when I hear of a new ownership group I'm not familiar with, or they don't have any sort of experience with alternative sports at the professional level, unlike a team like Fishers, where they run the Indy Fuel to where they probably have the basis to kind of jump into it. It's the Orlando Predators. The Predators are one of these legacy teams that have joined the AF1 after the AFL in 2024. John Chaney was talking of big game all off season long to kind of discuss what they could do, had the whole promotion where he slapped his hands on the balls with the AF1. Sorry, terrible terms. The football, just so we're all clear. But he just with the AF1 gloves on and everything. So it just to me, the way he had acted all off season, I never would have seen this coming. Never would have seen it coming. But here we are 4 days before they're supposed to kick off their season in Southwest Kansas. They informed the league that they no longer want to partake in the 2025 season. And now they've kind of backtracked on this. And if you're following along, if you're confused, trust me, you're not the only one. We're all a little bit confused on the situation. But just to kind of give a quick rundown on what's happening so far, they owed 2024 season ticket holders who renewed their season tickets in 2025 3 games. So they took a hit there financially because 3 of those games that those people were paying for were completely free. So they had discounted season tickets for their people coming back after 2024. Don't know how big of a hit that was. I don't know how many people were really kind of re-upping after 2024. Orlando has been one of the teams that has a huge arena. It doesn't seem like they've got a ton of support locally. Unfortunately, there's a lot going on in Orlando, of course. So after camp, they moved the team into cheaper housing, which I have heard was less than ideal. They failed to notify coaches and players of their plans to leave AF1 before the league press release came out. So players were finding out via other coaches. They were finding out via their friends on other teams who were not in practice at the moment. They literally were in practice when the announcement came out, which breaks my heart for some of these players. They're out there doing their part to try and prepare for the 2025 season, and ownership is making this decision without even having a discussion with some of the classiest coaches I've ever met in my life. EJ Burt, Marcus Manuel, that whole staff is just honestly top notch in how they handle player transactions, how they handle guys in general, and ultimately just really breaks my heart that Chaney couldn't even face his guys in person. I know you're going to take a lot of heat, but if you're going to make a decision of this manner that's going to affect the players, going to affect the coaches, you have to be a man, stand up and face them. Tell them face to face. There's not one single way I will ever forgive that man for doing that. You can say whatever you want about everything else he's done. That part of it will always irk me. But moving on, minimal ticket sponsorship sales staff was in place from the very beginning. They just seem to not really have the emphasis on some of these things that we all know is very important, especially when you have a $50,000 per night rental fee for the Kia Center. That is insanity at the indoor football level. I mean, there is no way you're breaking even on game nights. And if you're not making money on game nights, when are you making money? Because you're apparently not making it from ticket sales or sponsor sales at this point. Just a whole nother thing for another time. But John Chaney reportedly voted for the current business structure, then turned around and bashed on it as soon as this all came out. He made a statement blaming the league and business model for issues that, quite frankly, were of his own doing often. So signed the league affiliation agreement, and due to that, he's subject to $100,000 per game missed in 2025. You guys have probably seen the tweet from Steven Titus saying there's 1.2 million reasons why John Chaney should probably play in 2025. Well, that's because he got a $1.2 million invoice for games to be missed in 2025, which I'm sure Arizona will be receiving that same invoice as well. That's a lot of money to cough up just to not play. Now, I'm not saying that the AF1 will ever see every penny of that, but there will be legal action coming. I have zero doubt about it. And if that's the case, you're going to pay legal fees no matter what. So at what point does it become a wash and you ultimately just decide to come back, which is a rumor, by the way, that Orlando could come back, and they're kind of angling their press releases as such in the recent days as well. So that's a whole nother thing aside of this that just makes no sense to me. But let's go to Trey first on this one. I know I just kind of little bit of a fire, so hopefully you guys aren't too upset who are watching right now. And this is the portion of the show where we drop some. All right, Trey, what are your thoughts?
That was a good little touch. I like that. I like that. So before I dive into Orlando, I wanted to touch on something a little more hierarchy that covers Arizona and Orlando. I think it's really important for people to understand teams are independently owned and operated entities that have control over their own operations. So I think the league has made it very clear teams are in charge of their day-to-day, which is great to have and there's a lot of trust being put in, which is fantastic when you have the Salinas, the Billings, the Albanys that are taking care of business, doing what they need to do. But it's just unfortunate when you have these situations that arise, like the Wilkes-Barre, like Arizona, and now with Orlando. And Orlando really hits home for me because I grew up as an Orlando Predators fan. I had season tickets in the early 2000s. Not many people know this, but I went to the Arena Bowl and Arena Bowl 14, I think it was, against the Nashville Cats when I was like 8 years old. So I had the Orlando Predators, I love the Orlando Predators. I grew up with them. They were a part of my childhood. And to see them be the problem child is just so frustrating because they are a legacy brand that's been around for since '91. Took a little time off in late 2010s there, but it's just so frustrating to see it all take place. And I wrote a blog about this on offthewallfb.com. Go check it out. Kind of tearing into Orlando a little bit about their ticket pricing situation, and it's just mind-boggling to see that the cheapest get-in ticket to get into the building for an Orlando Predators game this year was $70. $70. You look at other teams in the league, you can get in the building for 3-4 times less than that. You can get in the building for $15 in other venues. And I know that rental fee that Sam touched on, obviously it has an effect on the price, but like, what do you expect to happen when you're charging $70 for an arena game? I think everyone involved can understand that arena football is supposed to be affordable, family fun, entertainment. What part of $70 to get in is if it's any part of the affordable family fun thing? So it's just a frustrating situation to see play out. And I feel like there are some external forces at play that we'll learn about over time regarding like how this all, the catalyst for this all taking place with Orlando specifically. But yeah, my heart goes out to the players and coaches that are affected, and hoping that they can find a good spot sooner than later. And if they do come back, I will say Orlando versus Billings will be must-watch TV. I will be dialed in. I will have 3-4 screens set up. I might fly into Billings for it. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's unfortunate how it all went down.
Steven Titus, if you're watching, make sure you get this man a ticket to come out to that game, because I assure you he will pay you back with the content that comes afterwards. I'm sure of it. Chad, what are your thoughts on Orlando? I mean, I know this kind of blindsided us all this week, but I'm curious to your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think get us all a ticket. You'll see some great content coming out of that game. Yeah, it's disappointing. I mean, first off, not trying to bash the state of Florida in general, but it's really tough. Like when you watch even professional sports like Tampa Bay Rays and this stuff, right? It's hard to get fans into the stands, right? And so having a $70 price point is tough. I mean, as a, I'll say this, as a Fisher Freight season ticket holder, I mean, my seats are 7 rows up from the field and mine are $30 a pop. Right. So, I mean, that, and there's cheaper tickets probably, I would assume, to get into the door. We'll find out on March 10th when they start selling single game tickets. But, it's, going back to the Orlando side, I mean, obviously, this was just handled every way wrong. Right. I mean, players are in the middle of practice and all of a sudden they're finding out that they're no longer a team in the league. You would think that would be some sort of internal conversation to have beforehand. So I think, he definitely dropped the ball on that and handling that. And really, even even if you are able to bring your team back, right? The question you have to have is what kind of damage did you just do, right? Not only to the coaches, but to the players. I mean, do you really think that the coaches and players want to play for you, especially in that situation when you didn't even give them the respect enough to tell them that you're going to fold the team, basically? That's the interesting part to see, right? I mean, even if they are able to come back, and that's a whole mess in general anyway. They were gone and now they want to come back and they're trying to do all this cease and desist stuff. And so, it's a hot mess. And really, you have to feel sorry for the players. You have to feel sorry for the coaches because there's, as you said, that's a great coaching staff there, right? And there's some great players that probably were excited to play some Predator football. But and you also have to feel sorry for the fans, right? And what this does too, if you're a casual fan, and like I said, like I mentioned earlier, the AF1 was doing a great job getting sponsorships and this and that. You start getting those casual fans in, all of a sudden they want to go to the league website and see what's happened. This team is folded. This team is folded. All this drama is going on. All of a sudden now, that's not only affecting the team, but that's also affecting the league because, now you got to restructure the whole schedule, right? I mean, now, they were supposed to face off against Southwest, right? And so now you have to switch around to where Nashville's coming into town and doing all that. And so, it really just doesn't help, especially when you had problems last season with the way things went and you're wanting to have a successful 2025 season. As a casual fan coming into the league, seeing all this, you're going to be immediately saying, I don't want to watch the AF1, right? And so that really hurts your product. And at the end of the day, it's just, none of this was handled. I don't think there's any situation of this that has happened to where it was like, okay, that was handled correctly, because it just was not. And you have to feel bad for everybody involved.
Yeah, definitely agree on that thought. TJ, what are your thoughts on Orlando? And then we'll kind of move on to some predictions for this week's games and then wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Orlando, it hit me a little bit too, because I also grew up as an Orlando Predators fan. I loved Jay Gruden, Les Moss, Joey Hamilton, Pat O'Hara back when he was a quarterback, believe it or not, before he went into coaching. But I just have so many fond memories of it. Little known quick story. When I was in high school and I realized that I wanted to coach football, a teacher of mine actually recommended arena football because it might be easier to get into, obviously, than the NFL. I called the Orlando Predators number, got on the phone, somehow got a hold of Les Moss, who then put me to Jay Gruden, who's actually, to his just awesomeness, sat and had like a 10-15 minute conversation with me about what it would take to be a coach and what I had to keep doing. Just love the game, eat, sleep, breathe it. The only person who can say I can't do it is myself. Everything else literally put me on the path where, what, I can be a head coach. So for me, it really hits home, because just Orlando was always that marquee franchise to me. And after having that conversation, obviously they had my undying loyalty. And to see this happen, decades later, it sucks, because it completely tarnishes the name, the brand. The only good thing, I'll say in quotations, that came out of it was quickly after the announcement, everybody with the information coming out started jumping on them instead of just the league. Everyone understood it was not the league's fault. It was completely on the ownership of Orlando. But again, you have all these players who literally uprooted their lives to come and play for an opportunity in this new, I'm sure they were promoting the new Premier Arena League, and then just to have the plug pulled literally less than a week before the season starts. That is just, it's unacceptable. In my personal opinion, uh, any ownership that is whether it's the current ownership that I believe still owns the team, the new group that was coming in that started all this, neither one of them is ever going to be trusted. Point blank. I really do. I see it becoming really hard, depending on how this all breaks down between Orlando and the AF1. If the Orlando Predators, unfortunately, are even able to make a comeback in another league, just because loyalty and trust, there is none with the Orlando brand right now. And that's really unfortunate, because they're a legacy team, and honestly they were one of the premier teams in the AFL in the 90s and early 2000s, and to see it just be tarnished this badly, it's sickening, to be honest with you, as a longtime arena fan.
Sickening is a word that has definitely come up several times when it comes to this situation, and especially how it was handled by ownership. But there's one more topic that I had forgotten to bring up, and I definitely want to get to it because I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on this. But we saw this unfold last season, and it looks like we're going to be seeing this unfold once again this season. There could be an NAL legal battle with Corpus Christi over the situation with them being removed from the schedule in the NAL and then joining the AF1. Real quick, just off the cuff thoughts, not going to ask you guys to really break this one down. How do you guys feel this ultimately ends up? Do we see a settlement like we did with West Texas? Does it make it anywhere in court? Let's go to Trey first on this one.
I think it's a brave move to try to take Steve Titus and Jerry Kurz to court, knowing what we know about them off the field and, what they do outside of football. So I think it is probably just a money grab situation, unfortunately. And we've seen this play out with West Texas last year. So I don't know too much about it. I'm not going to pretend like I do, but it is a little childish, if we're just being honest, the way it's looking like it's going to play out. And why can't we just play football, guys? Why can't we just go out and play some ball, throw the old pigskin around, or throw the old composite ball around, and just have ourselves a time?
I love that thought. TJ, what are your thoughts on this, and where do you think it ends up?
It'll probably end up in, another settlement. I completely agree with Trey. It's another money grab situation. Not the best look for the NAL, in my opinion, either. But I mean, hey, a contract's a contract, and hopefully it doesn't, get too ugly or make certain things or teams have to dissolve just to pay the potential fine back.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see how this all unfolds. Chad, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'll just echo what both these guys said. I mean, to me, when I first heard about it, it felt like a cash grab. I think it ends up in a settlement as well. And I completely agree with Trey. Like, can we just play football? Like, let's just play football. Like, come on. I think that's why we're all here talking about it. Like, we just want the games to start. Like, I'm itching to watch something tonight. And and like I said, every time you turn around and hear about legal battles and teams folding and this and that, like, let's just get the football, please. Let's get this all out of the way and let's focus on having a great season.
Agreed. I'm going to go ahead and reserve my judgment on that one. These guys hit the nail on the head with their thoughts, and I'm just going to kind of leave it at that on that. A couple comments I wanted to roll through real quick before we move on. But Nick Moss says, would one of you guys like to come on his sports radio show at 8 a.m. PST and discuss the Arizona situation? I assume he means tomorrow. Nick, shoot us a DM at Shady Sports Network. I'm sure you can DM Off the Wall as well. I'm sure one of us can find some time to try and work something out with you. If it doesn't work, it's no hard feelings on our part. You've been great today, dropping all these comments and tuning in. So really appreciate your time to join us today. Adam says front row seats in Billings is less than $50 per game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just getting on that price point again. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I mean, like you said, it has to do with being in that big Kia Center, right? I mean, there's got to be some sort of venue that if they drop that down to a smaller scale, I would assume the price would go down on those tickets as well. Because as Trey said, I mean, he hit it perfectly. This is supposed to be a family-oriented sport, right? Like when it comes to fan-wise, it's supposed to be something where you could take the entire family out. You don't have to spin an arm and a leg like you do at NFL games, right? So, having that $70 price point just does not help at all in that situation.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, the Kia Center was built for the Orlando Magic, NBA team. The Orlando Magic to get into the building is $23.
Yep.
The Orlando Predators to get in the building is $70. Like
make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all. And I'm from Orlando. I know there are alternative venues that may not be in Orlando proper, but you're looking at areas like Kissimmee, Claremont. Like there are areas in the Central Florida area that they could go to make it a little bit cheaper. It's going to be a little bit of a haul, but I just don't think pride and ego will allow those smaller venues to come into play. So we'll see how that works out, though.
Yeah, because I remember even back in the early 2000s, I mean, people may or may not remember, but the Firebirds were in Indiana at one point. And so they played at Marcus Square Arena, which was built for the Pacers. And I still remember going to games, and that place was hardly full because it was just such a large venue. They tried to get it to the Farmers Coliseum, but it just didn't work out. Okay. But so they decided to have it at the Marcus Square Arena at that time. And it was that's why the Firebirds didn't last that long in Indianapolis.
See, I actually have different experiences. When I first saw my first AFL game, it was way back in 2005. I was a sophomore in high school. I know I'm old as dirt. It was a great experience because I walked into what is now called the Ball Arena, 20,000 plus seat arena where the Colorado Avalanche, the Denver Nuggets, all these different great major league teams play. And that place was packed. The atmosphere was electric. And honestly, I don't know that arena football would have hit me like it did if I had not ever experienced that. That was 20 years ago this season. And it was a situation where I was instantly a fan. Instantly. The second I walked in and just felt the arena shaking, guys pounding their feet on the floor, in between defensive plays and stuff like that. It was just amazing. It was a great atmosphere. And, I honestly, I wish John Elway and those huge name owners that had the teams that could actually foot the bill for stuff like this continue to be invested in it. But unfortunately, it's just not what arena football is at this point. So definitely curious to see if we ever get back to that point. But we've covered a lot of subjects today. We've had probably one of the highest live viewerships we've ever had on a show here at Shady Sports Network. So really appreciate everybody who's tuned in, who's shared this. Huge appreciation on our part. Almost 160. Oh, we just topped 160 live viewers on this show. So pretty great numbers today. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. You guys are great. Hit that like button, comment, subscribe. But the next comment I want to see is your predictions for today. So we're going to go to Trey first on this one. You guys don't have to give any sort of explanation if you don't want to. We've got a total of 5 games today, 4 NAL, 1 that's interleague play, so it doesn't really count on their schedule. And then we also have 1 AF1 game, which is, of course, on Evergreen now today. So we've got Sioux City at Beaumont, Omaha at Shreveport, Peach State at Columbus, Colorado at Wheeling, and Nashville at Southwest Kansas. So if you just want to run down and give your thoughts, I will, give you the floor, Trey.
So I'm going to pass on the NAL games just because I'm very novice to it. I can throw a dart at the board and make a guess, but I don't think that'd be fun for anybody. I will touch on Nashville versus Southwest Kansas, though. I looking on Better Edge, I think Southwest Kansas is listed as a 9.5-point favorite, and I think Southwest Kansas is going to roll over Nashville. I think everyone's high on Nashville because of the coaching pedigree and because of this and that, but I'm going to be real. I'm not going to pretend like 2023 didn't happen with Coach Arbette and Bay Area. Last time Coach Arbette was in the game before 2023 was a decade ago. And looking at the roster, nothing really excites me about the Nashville Cats. I think they have some good pieces, but nothing that screams like this team is incredible. Can they prove me wrong? Absolutely. I know Nashville will also be going in rotating quarterbacks, which I just don't like going into that. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none, in my opinion. Southwest Kansas struggled with that early last season when they were alternating between quarterbacks and couldn't really get into a flow. But I really like what Southwest Kansas is building on offense. I think Daquan Bailey-Brown is electric, unbelievable in the kick return game, and he's going to be posing some problems on offense. And I think defensively, Southwest Kansas is bringing back a lot of good pieces in the secondary. So I think Southwest Kansas is going to win big tonight.
Love to hear that. Let's move on to TJ. TJ, what are your thoughts on all these games?
Ooh. Man, the first one's really tough. I'm going to go. I think, I'm going to go with Beaumont. I'm going to say they win their debut. I think Omaha's going to come back out after the very embarrassing preseason performance and get a win. Got to go with Columbus. On a side note, my former team of mine actually faced Peach State. We won. So I'm going to go with Columbus. And obviously, I have Wheeling, as my, championship contender. So I got to go with them winning week 1 right out of the gate. And Nashville and Southwest Kansas, I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Southwest Kansas is going to weather the storm in the end and get the win. And that was my corny dad joke for the day.
Hey, got to have dad jokes. Love it. Chad, who are your picks for today?
I love the dad joke. Yeah, I mean, I got to go, with Beaumont over Sioux City. I mean, that preseason game that came out 163-0. I mean, they just really dominated, as you should against those type of teams. Shreveport and Omaha is a really interesting game. As mentioned, I mean, Omaha losing to the Minneapolis Warriors by 1. A lot of people didn't see that coming in the preseason, right? Granted, it is preseason football, so Shreveport, I feel like, yes, they won their game, right? There was at times against Dallas that they looked kind of rough. Maybe that was just because it is like the first game, right? So I feel like Shreveport at home, I feel like that may be an opportunity, but I have to take Omaha in this situation. Columbus, I think, is an easy pick for this game. Wheeling, I feel like, is an easy pick. And then looking at Southwest and Nashville, I mean, Nashville preparing for a totally different opponent 4 days ago, 5 days ago. Now they got to prepare against Southwest Kansas. I think that might throw them off a little bit. I'm gonna also pick Southwest Kansas to take this victory as well.
Real quick, I did not catch your picks for I got Omaha and Wheeling. Who are the other NAL teams?
So I picked Beaumont, and I picked Omaha, and I picked Columbus and Wheeling.
Okay.
Yep.
And then it was Southwest Kansas for
Yep.
the
And then Southwest Kansas.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I apologize on that one.
Yeah,
I'm keeping track of all these picks throughout the season. So if you drop your picks in the chat, I will also make sure to grab your picks and add them to our docket here for the future. So you can kind of play along with us all season long if you'd like, and we can kind of keep a record for you as well. You know, I thought it was a fun aspect that we had going last season. But as far as my picks, I'm going with Southwest Kansas for the AF1. I'm going Sioux City, Omaha, Wheeling, and then Columbus. So just for anybody curious what I would be picking, those are my picks. This week in Arena Ball, also known as Albany Defense Kid, dropped his picks: Sioux City, Shreveport, Columbus, Wheeling, and Southwest Kansas. It scares me that Southwest Kansas has been picked across the board. You always got to wonder about that, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And once again, thank you, everybody who tuned in. We actually just topped 170 live viewers. Huge, huge numbers today. So really appreciate everybody who tuned in. This is huge for us. You know, we are looking to grow this show in 2025. You know, we've had a lot of good success on this one. Really excited about this season. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss, and it will be every week this week. So make sure you guys are tuning in every week, and we will continue to have a great season. On that note, we'll catch you guys next Saturday for Superfan Saturday. We got a bunch of guys that are coming on to kind of discuss the MVPs of the sport, the fans. It's time we shine a light on the camera, turn the camera around, shine a light on the fans, because it's because of all you guys that are watching right now that these teams still exist. So thank you for everything you do for the sport. Thank you for everything you do for us. And we will catch you guys next Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern for hopefully what will not be a 2-hour live show.